I can't see your faces while I'm presenting in this mode, so please, if there's anything that you need me to slow down about, everything to speed up on, and even if there's anything you want me to reiterate, if there's anything that's not making sense or not clear, or you can't see anything at any point, please just take your mic off and shout at me, because as I said, I can't see the chat box at the moment. So I am Dr. Emma Bolger. I am a lecturer and the programme leader at the University of the West of Scotland for the Career Guidance and Development MSc programme. I also supervise students who are completing PhDs within the CIAG sector, and I also support people who are conducting research whilst working in professional roles in our sector. So really interested in research, and I'm particularly interested in practitioner-led research. If you were at this conference last year, you might have already seen me presenting on CIAG practitioner research previously. If not, just a quick recap so you can get a sense of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about ethical research in our sector. I very strongly believe that a career development practitioner, when you're conducting any element of your practice, you have to conduct that in line with the values of your sector. And for us, conducting research is very much part of our practice. So for any research that you might undertake as a practitioner researcher, you must uphold ethical values in that research. Now, research has a lot of its own additional ethical parameters and expectations that come to it. And I'm hoping that my presentation today will help to give you a structure that you might be able to replicate or use in order to be able to demonstrate how well engaged you are with the ethics of our sector while you're conducting practitioner-led research. So the aims of this session are very much about hopefully giving you some practical ideas as to how you can evidence your ethical approach by linking it directly to the values that we hold in our sector. Now, we'll be looking at the CDI code of ethics as we go through this, but there are also other codes of ethics and codes of practice that we can see linking to this directly as well. This slide deck will come out to you afterwards, so you can have a look at it. In the notes within the slide deck are links directly to, while I'm talking about the CDI code of practice today, you could also link the points that I'm making directly to other codes of practice, for example, the AGCAS code of practice, which is noted within the notes section on this slide deck. So there'll be other ways and other codes of practice that you might want to look to, but for here today, we're going to be using the CDI. Really important, again, more of a recap than anything else, but if you're promoting yourself as a member of a certain professional body, such as the CDI, then you really do have to embody that organisation's values in the work that you do across all practice, and that includes your research. Now, one way to do that is to embed direct and explicit reference to the code of practice or the code of ethics for your sector within research methodology when you're conducting a research project. So I'm making an assumption at this stage that some of you are already engaged in research, some of you are planning to engage in research, or you may be looking back at the research that you've done previously and wondering if you could enhance the way in which you've engaged in ethical practice. Ethics is a really important part of robust research. Being able to talk about the codes of practice and within your methodological approach, and we're talking here about how you're going to conduct your research, how you're going to build up to that, how you're going to prepare for it, how you're going to make sure it's compliant in many, many different ways. This explicit focus on ethics that come from your professional body can really help you to separate your guidance practice from your research practice. It can be quite challenging to do that, particularly when we're researching a topic that's perhaps very close to the way in which we practice or the issues that we're seeing within our practice. So being able to very clearly and explicitly think about ethical processes can be really helpful to you in detaching yourself and putting yourself in the position of researcher when you're looking at something that can feel quite close to practice. Ethical values are really, really important because the way in which you conduct your research does have an impact on your professional reputation and the institution, the organisation perhaps that you work for, or a professional body to which you are affiliated. So being able to evidence that we use the values of our sector in our research is really important, and it also helps to advocate for the sector in which we work and highlight the way in which we do have robust, stringent ethical processes behind our practice. But when we look at ethical codes and when we look at research, we see often the language of research methods and methodology can often be around the law, legal compliance, data protection, those sorts of things. And we are very much aware that the work that we do actually brings with it a need for ethical and moral sensitivity within the process. So there are links between our professional status, the way in which we practice, and researcher ethics, because within the ethics process that you'll have to go through, for example, if you're doing a PhD or a dissertation or any piece of research that you want to be able to stand up to scrutiny within the public eye, there is a requirement to comply with expectations around ethical practice. And our ethical codes can really help us to bring to life what that looks like. Because it can be hard when you're filling in an ethics form to think about, well, actually, I don't know how to evidence what I know to be required in this situation. What I'm talking about today is very much linked to an earlier article that I produced in Career Matters. You may have seen this a couple of years ago now, it was April 2019. And I brought into that article an introduction into how I mapped my own research against the 11 points of the CDI Code of Ethics. Now, I'll approach that in further detail, as I say, in this presentation, but you might want to, look to the AGCAS Code of Ethics as well. And I'll say I'll be able to bring points of the AGCAS Code into this presentation too, but they're mainly noted within the notes section, so you can take a look at that as in more detail yourselves if you are thinking that you want to link to the AGCAS Code. But primarily, I'm using the CDI's Code of Ethics structure for this presentation today. I'm going to run through each of those 11 points of the code as we go on, but I just want to make you just clarify what are the assumptions that I'm making here. I am assuming that you are already kind of planning or currently working on a project, and I'm hoping that these aspects of ethical research that I'm going to talk about are already there and integral to the work that you're doing. I'm just going to help to add maybe a little bit more in relation to real-world examples of how the Code of Ethics filters into ethical practice in research. So we have a reference there from a book that is really, really valuable to anybody who is looking at CPD as a career development professional. So it's by Claire Johnson and Siobhan Neary from 2016, career development, professional development there for the career development professional. They also highlight within that text, when talking about practitioner-led research, they also highlight the key expectations of ethical research. Now, I'm also making an assumption here that you are aware of these key baseline expectations that people who are working with, we call human participants, individuals who are responding to surveys or research participants as interviewees or focus group participants, for example, I'm making an assumption that you already have some understanding of the need for informed consent, data information, clarity around how that's going to be stored, and I'm making an assumption that you understand that ethical practice requires looking at risk assessment, making sure that data is treated with accuracy and appropriately, that you're not coercing anyone into research with you, that people are free to withdraw, that there's participant information sheets, all of those additional things that we would expect to be there already. And then what I'm hoping to do here in this session is take you through bringing those key points to life. So we've got key ethical considerations, they're listed here. We've got consent, coercion, withdrawal, anonymity, all of these key aspects of ethical research that are maybe expected of you because you're a student working within a university. You might have an ethics process to go through, you're doing a PhD or a master's, or they may be expected of the organisation in which you're working, because all research that is conducted by them or authorised by them expects you to meet this. There are general parameters as well expected of people who are conducting social research more broadly as well. That would be ultimately the backbone of ethics and within your methodological approach. But let's take a look at the CDI Code of Ethics. And a really nice quote that I think sums up why I went to the Code of Ethics when I was trying to bring life to the ethics chapter that I was writing for my PhD initially. And I really wanted to bring it to life with reference to our sector and what we do. I thought this quote was lovely. And the CDI said the Code of Ethics should be used and referred to as a tool to increase and maintain a common trust and understanding of values and beliefs necessary to do our work. And I think that also really, we often look at these things and think that just applies to practice, but actually I think this is a really, really important and really integral part of how we conduct research as practitioners. And also we know, and I'm sure this is, you've picked this up from today and any previous sessions you've attended around practitioner research, practitioners are very, very well positioned to initiate and conduct research and to really get a sense of what does need to be looked at in the sector and in the world around us, and having a really unique perspective on that. So I think your common trust and understanding of values, I think, is something that is so important and translates from the work that we do in frontline practice into the things that maybe researchers seem to be a little bit more behind the scenes, but that also, the Code of Ethics is very much integral to what we do. So we've got the list of the 11 points of the Code of Ethics there, which I hope you're all familiar with at this stage and have got a sense of what they cover. The Code of Ethics is available for everybody who isn't familiar with it via the CDI's website. We're just going to work through each of these point by point and talk about how I've been able to think about these in research practice previously. So the first point to look at is accessibility. So what do we mean by accessibility when we are conducting research? Well, for me, it's very, very, very important that we look at accessibility as enabling people to access, read, review, engage with the research that we do. So it's all well and good for, if I was in academic mode and I was writing an article for a journal and I was, submitting it, going through all the processes of it being peer reviewed, and then it goes into a lovely academic journal, very highly rated, very much held in esteem by my colleagues within the university institutions and so on. But ultimately, if that's sitting behind a firewall that nobody other than people with access to that journal through perhaps their university library can see that, then that to me is not particularly accessible research for people within our sector. Now, there may be a place for a journal article, but I'd also like to see that the learning, the findings, the recommendations that I've gained from writing that journal article can be met with by other people who maybe need other ways in which to engage with that. So what ideally we're looking for is that practitioners, perhaps without academic expertise or without academic networks, are able to find out about the findings of research. So if you're a university-based researcher, perhaps you're doing a PhD or you're doing a master's and you're thinking about writing journal articles based on your work, or if you're like me, an academic, you should be thinking not just about the format and the style and the language of your work, but it's about thinking about how to what extent can we make our resources openly accessible, not held behind, for example, subscription-only firewalls, which we see even with newspaper articles quite common too. So it's really important that we conduct research that can be accessed, that can be seen and used by as many people as possible, because otherwise we're closing down that research that could be valuable to others. And we know that within our sector, we're often very under-resourced. We don't have a huge surplus of cash knocking about to be able to buy an academic journal article because we think that's going to be able to justify an aspect of our work to a manager or a partner. So we need to be able to think about, well, where is our work going to end up? So summary overviews with contact details for the author is always a good idea. So when you're thinking about where am I going to put my research at the end of this, when you're writing your ethics section of your proposal for your research, you're thinking about where am I going to put this work at the end, and make sure your contact details are there. Now, if somebody said to me, you've written a journal article, I can't access it, I'd really like to read it. If someone contacted me directly and said, could I have a copy of that? Most cases, your author will do that. So that's something else to bear in mind. So you've got contact details for an author, it's always worth trying them directly. Every Every type of opportunity to promote or disseminate your work should be taken up to make sure that you get as wide an audience as possible. So that might be something like today. You've certainly heard people talking about the research they've conducted today as part of a professional development conference. Things like webinars, like the CDI run the lunchtime webinars that we've had on. That is often where you find people talking about their research. Of course, alongside all of this, we have the general principles of accessibility. So we need to think this term quite broadly. So just making sure that everything that you're doing is in adaptable formats, that you're able to provide alternative formats, that your language is inclusive, that you're using plain English resources when you're thinking about the text and the language that you're using, and you're thinking about the many different ways in which you can promote your work and use language which is easily accessible and easily read and understood by people perhaps out with your own specialist area. Now, we're moving a little bit on now. We start to think about accountability within the code of practice is very much coming back to the fact that we are open to scrutiny, and we should be, as we are, as we are in our sector. But we often do conduct our work on a one-to-one basis where we are solely responsible for our conduct and our activity. And within our research, we can convey the same kind of values and ethos that we convey within one-to-one guidance practice, where we are willing to let the work that we do, let the practice that we do, be scrutinised by others. So we have to be open to perhaps saying, I'm willing to have questions asked of me. I'm willing to take questions about my research and the value of it and the processes that I've gone through to get there. So we're going to be very open to the fact that I'm keen to, if I'm writing a proposal for some research and I'm not within the lovely networks of a university where someone's going to review my ethics form, if I'm not within that network, having someone else who maybe look over a project proposal or the findings of some research can be really helpful. So the code of ethics can be really helpful in itself, just in its very existence when you're conducting research. Within fieldwork, so what we talk about data collection when we're doing research, the code of ethics, just having that present, a link to it perhaps in your participant information sheet, or even having it printed out on the piece of paper in front of you, having the lovely printed copy that we all get each year through the CDI. We all have a copy of the Code of Ethics sent to us, having a lovely laminated copy of that on your desk in front of you when you're doing a research interview with someone, and pointing out these are the standards to which I uphold within my research, could be really helpful, and it would maybe just give your research participants that little bit extra sense of, this is a robust research, this is someone I can trust to give my data to. They will treat the data that I'm going to convey to them with respect that it deserves. So just explicitly coming in and saying, hello, I'm a member of the Career Development Institute, or I'm a member of AGCAS or another professional body, and coming in and saying, this is the code I uphold in my work, in my practice, in my research. Furthers not only the confidence that your participant might have in you, but it also highlights the fact that we are maintaining those standards in all that we do as members of the body. A simple one, autonomy. Just a couple of lines on this one that I think are really important when we look at the value of this for our ethical processes in research. We've already said research should align very much with core principles of careers practice. And for that, we need to remember when we aren't on duty as careers professionals, as careers advisors, when we're not in career advisor mode, when we're not in counsellor mode, when we're not giving one-to-one guidance. We have to be very, very careful to be mindful of the fact that it's easy for us to veer in to that area. We are, particularly those of us who are doing CIAG practice, day in, day out, as that is our day job. We need to be mindful when we're conducting research that we do not overstep the mark and start trying to give any kind of advice or any biased information in the same way that we would if we were conducting a career interview. So we need to just be mindful of that. And these are lots of ways in which you can draw parallels between practice and the values that you've got as a practitioner that you can bring to ethical research. But most importantly, coming back to looking at research practice, in no way will you be intervening with unsolicited advice or giving anything, any biased kind of interventions when you're conducting a research interview, or if you're, kind of conducting quantitative data collection, your phrasing and your language is as neutral as possible. Competence, something that hopefully we all have, and we have lots of competency cycles that I'm sure many of us have looked at when we've been going through our training and education within this sector. Competence is something that we have when we're career development professionals working in the sector. We know that we are aware of our professional values, we're aware of our professional competence, we are aware of the skills that we need to undertake our occupational day-to-day roles. Now, we mustn't make an assumption that what we know from one area of our lives translates directly to another. And around competence, it may be that you do need to undertake some training in research before you're able to conduct research. And this is something that you can acknowledge within any ethics statement that you're making about your research. You may be wanting to highlight that prior to commencing any data collection or quantitative or qualitative research of any form, before actually putting, I was going to say pen to paper, but fingers to keyboard and typing up the questions for your survey that you want to go out to your client base or your customers, or previous individuals you've worked for, or the general population. You may want to acknowledge somewhere in your ethical approach to your study that actually I had to go away and do some training to be able to do this. Now, that can be in many different forms. It can be formal, it can be informal, but you shouldn't be starting to collect any data or conducting any research until you have got the skills that you need for that project. So this can take a bit of self-reflection. This is, valuable within your any learning journals or reflective journals that you have. One thing to say, yeah, I fancy doing some research. It's another to have a bit of self-reflection and think, have I actually got the skills to do that research? So another important stage, which again links directly back to the code of ethics, whatever we do, in whatever way we're linking ourselves back to any professional body, we should be making sure that we've got the competence that we require for that role, and something easy to talk about and easy to act upon when preparing to do research. Confidentiality, a really important part of all that we do. And one of the things that I would say possibly will come easy to career development practitioners who are moving into research. We know about the Data Protection Act and its forerunners within the GDPR. We've undertaken training probably within our organisations, and we're also very aware of the fact that mistreatment of data can lead to quite heavy penalties, and it can also lead to really negative perceptions of you as an individual and the organisation that you might be affiliated with. So we just expect that anyone who is working with us as a research participant expects to have all their data treated the same way as they would be if they were CIAG clients. And again, when you look at research, the parameters that we have when we're conducting one-to-one interviews or group work, these do translate directly into research. So we have the contracting stage that we have within our interviews. These do find a place within research, and we know that confidential information should only be disclosed when we're thinking about the participant's safety, or indeed the safety of you as a researcher. Always important to be mindful within your research process of your position as well, and any potential for any harm that could come to you. But this all comes right under the requirements of, is there anything that in relation to human safety or requirements of the law to disclose any information? So you're working within very similar parameters there. CPD is another point within the code of practice. Now, we could argue that all research is, to an extent, a form of CPD, and a very, very important one at that. Certainly a professional development that contributes not only to you personally, but to the sector and colleagues and partners as well. During professional development of any form, reflection is really, really important. Professional development, to be able to work out what professional development you need, you're generally having to engage in some reflective activity to get there. So research reflexivity is a phrase that's often used within, kind of lofty academic circles when we're talking about PhD level study, but we know what we mean when we're talking about self-reflection and self-awareness. there are many ways in which you might want to record this, in the same way that you might want to record it about your ongoing practice. But a research diary can be really helpful to log down what's happening as you're going through your research processes, and help you to maybe identify any of those issues. We talked about competency already, any of those issues that might arise about your competency, and you think, you know what, actually I've reached the boundaries of what I'm able to do here. I think I need to do some extra training. So we know that CPD, let's think about that directly in relation to good, solid, reflective management of what's going on at the same time. How do you engage with CPD around research? Well, you're here today, you're engaging right now with sector-led researcher training. All the topics that we're talking about today are very much about what those of us who've been working and interested and keen to learn about and support others to engage in research are very passionate about. So, you know, that's what we're here today, and that's all the topics that we're talking about are the things, in many cases, are the things that we would have really liked when we were at the start of our researcher journey too. So bear that in mind. That's what we're here. You know, we've got lots of partnership activity around this, and a lot of organisations that will really see the value of sector-led researcher training. So we're here today. The CPD modules at my institution that I've recently started around researcher training. There's lots of ad hoc training out there as well. There are lots of introductory type training offers out there. So you might find that there are MOOCs or open educational resources that give you a basic introduction to conducting research that can be really helpful for getting you started and for just getting a sense of what does research look like. So these might be things that you've already done. These very well, I may be talking to you now and you're saying, yeah, I've got a diary going. Yeah, I've been noting all this down. I know all this, I'm doing it. But what I'm talking about mainly here is when you're writing up perhaps a research proposal and you're talking about your ethics section. I'm trying to give you a structure as to how you can link that and make that a really nice narrative as to how you're not only doing these things, but they link directly to your sector and your status as a career development professional and a member of a professional body. So while these may well be things that you think, I've done that, yeah, I've had a shot at that already. Where do they find a place when you're talking about what a good researcher you are, how robust and valid your research is going to be? It's also really nice to show willingness to share and train other professionals in tools and techniques. Again, that's what I'm here today doing. I'm talking to you about what I found to be a particularly useful tool for me when I was structuring my ethics chapter of my PhD. I used this format. I used going back to the code of ethics. It worked for me. I'm hoping that it might work for others and with you as well. It might not work for all of you, but it's an idea, and it hopefully helps to bring to life what it is that you're trying to do in your research. So we have a commitment, and it's also really, I'm really interested, and I would love myself, I really love personally to hear how other people have done this when they've done research as well. I'm really keen to find out from people, well, how did you do your ethics, and how did you link that to your professional status, your position as a career development professional? Because personally for me, I really enjoyed it. I've done a PhD, really enjoyed it, took a long time. The best bit of it for me was that I actually loved the ethical process, was the bit that really ticked my boxes, the better understanding of why we need research and why we conduct research and why practitioner-led research is so important. And that was the bit that really fired me up. My context and my content, my PhD was obviously something I was interested in. The actual process behind it were what really made me, really engaged me, and the bits that I probably enjoyed the most. So back onto our code of ethics, the duty of care that we have to clients, colleagues, organisations and self. And we could easily add on to that another comma and a final note saying to participants, research participants. So clients, colleagues, organisations, self and other stakeholders, researchers and that we really need to be mindful of all the people that they're working with. So we also, we need to think about engagement with practitioner, researcher communities of practice when we're thinking about the research that we do. We can gain insight on what we're doing from other people. We can, talk to others about, this is the research that I'm thinking of doing. Is there having a chat with somebody and saying, do you think this is okay? Like, do you think I'm crossing any boundaries or barriers here? Do you think there's anything that I'm talking about that might possibly be triggering for someone. How am I going to manage that? Research can be highly sensitive and highly personal. So we do need to think about duty of care, and sometimes having a third party's overview of that can be really helpful. Role expectations are really important, and we need to be very, very clear when we're conducting research that we are not there in the capacity as a career advisor at that point. So you may well find that you are conducting research for people who know you in both of your roles as both a researcher and a practitioner. So you may need to highlight that and clarify that, because that may affect the way in which people talk to you. It may be useful at the contracting stage of a research interview to reiterate the difference between what you're doing. So you know that you've got a research interview, a data collection tool, but then you've also got career guidance interventions that are about individual change and action-orientated interactions. So we need to be clear not only in our heads, but sometimes you might have to be clear about that with the people that we're working with. And for this, look to all affiliations that might have relevance to this. Yes, you can use the CGI Code of Ethics. You may also have employer codes that are relevant to this. So if you're conducting research that has been authorised or organised by your workplace, you may also need to look to your organisational codes to add some context to this too. Equality, hopefully, is a principle that if you're thinking of conducting any research, you've got very much at the forefront of what you're doing. Now, obviously, we have the Equality Act with an essential compliance with legislation. If possible, conducting an equality impact assessment of any research that you're planning to undertake can be really, really helpful. This can also be beneficial in terms of making sure that you are going to attract responses from a diverse population to make sure that you've got a good quality sample of people who are engaging with any research that you might be doing. How well will you promote it to all groups of people from many different cohorts? Intersectionality is really important if you're wanting to make sure that you are thinking not only of gaining information perhaps about about a single characteristic that somebody may present. It's really important to think about how we aren't just all one thing and one tick box, and this can be really important in your research when you may be thinking about the language that you're using. You may be focusing on that, but perhaps not thinking so much about the actual data and it's how inclusive it is to individuals who may not think initially that this survey's for them, for example, or they're the sort of person you're wanting to talk to, because they only perhaps tick one box, or maybe they feel like they tick too many boxes, and that's not what you're looking for. So intersectionality is a really important aspect of all research at the moment, and that being mindful of that really helps you to recruit from as diverse a group of people as possible. Where possible, please, as a practitioner, it is so important that we gain a better understanding of the experiences of underrepresented groups. And for many of you conducting research, what you'll be trying to do is raise the visibility of experiences of people in underrepresented groups who are perhaps not getting the attention, the issues that are not getting the attention that they deserve to have within perhaps the mainstream media. So a lot of what we may be doing is making visible experiences that are unseen, and that can often be because they're from underrepresented groups or people who are already less well represented within the labour market or within employment and training and education. So you should be able to identify and work with those groups and be able to really show a practical commitment to issues relating to equality, diversity and inclusion. So when we're thinking about, we talk a lot about positive action in the work that we do and positive action in society. So something that you can be thinking about even when you're conducting research processes as well. Impartiality is something that hopefully is very clear on all of our radars, and research obviously should be independent. You are working independently. Now, if you are funded, for example, by a certain organisation or an employer, you do have to be very careful around this and be very clear that you are an independent researcher. You are looking at things independently. You are looking at things as they stand without influence of bias from other parties in the research that you are conducting. Now, even when you're conducting research for a major organisation, it may well be that your research participants look at you and think, yeah, but Are you really that independent? It can be helpful to be very clear about which professional bodies you may be linked to and whose values you uphold. Now, in turn, that may again lead to people thinking, this person's got a bit of bias going on here. Now, if you say to people, I'm conducting research as a career development professional, you've already got some baggage there as to what you might be wanting to approach or how you might be wanting to present your work. Being upfront about this and being clear about who you are linked to is very, very important. And the transparency around that really helps you to convey to others that you're doing this work in a robust way. Any sponsors should be known. You should really try and not sway your output in the direction of the needs or the objectives of those around you. But, and I'm going to say something that probably it could be a bit of an uncomfortable comment perhaps for some researchers, but in the research that we do as members of the career development sector, in most cases that when I'm talking to people and trying to support them to do their research, I do say try not to shy away from the fact that much of what we do in our research is give a nod to the value of research being undertaken by career development professionals. We have a unique perspective. We are very much client-centered in the outcomes that we'll have when we write. It comes to us, quite naturally that we will talk about data, but we will often be talking about recommendations and outcomes that sit more around client-centered outcomes perhaps than economic benefits. We will be trying as much as we can to advocate for our role as career development professionals, for the work that we do, for the value that we know we add, and for the value that career development practice has for clients and for individuals. So we're impartial, yes, but we probably do also need to somewhere acknowledge and have that caveat that there is within much of our work an argument underpinning, there is a bias in there somewhere about the fact that we are doing this because we see the value of our approach. So where other research findings, another researcher might come and, we've all got bias, we've all got researcher bias, and this is what is important to surface. But we will always be coming at things with, with an approach from that position of always having to advocate and justify what we do, but also bearing in mind that the type of outcomes, the type of recommendations we might look to may well be different to what another researcher might pick up. Transparency links to that directly. Is transparency perhaps synonymous with accuracy? Accuracy, visibility, lots of different words we could use around this, but be very clear, for example, if you wanted to bring this one to life, for example, data collection. If I've collected data on you, you're very welcome to review it if you want to. So that's a Freedom of Information Act tick box that will be covered perhaps in a participant information sheet, but a very clear way to link directly. Trustworthiness, another really simple one, deliver on what you promise to do. If you say that you're going to do something by the end of your research, try and make sure that you do deliver that. So this is one of the things that you mention in your ethics, but also comes down to you making sure that you've done everything you said you would. And around trustworthiness as well, treating your participants in your research the same level of professional treatment that they would get if they were seeing you within a professional capacity. So just coming to the end, I'm hoping that there are some ideas in there. Now, not all of them will perhaps apply, but I'm hoping that you can help for yourself start to think about some well thought through ways to apply the code of ethics to a research project that you are doing that really exemplifies the high standards that are held up by our profession and sector and really helps you to prove that you've got a commitment to ethical research. Remember that ethics is absolutely at the heart of what we do as practitioners, and being really rigorously dedicated. You might be looking at this thinking, oh, this is a bit much, but she's really gone to town on this one, hasn't she, Emma? She's absolutely OTT on the ethics and the code of practice. Well, yes, I am. And the reason for that is I think that really showing a dedication to ethical practice is what puts us head and shoulders above others. It's what promotes our sector. It's what really highlights how to me, how career development research practitioners have unique strengths and unique qualities that can be harnessed for wider benefit in the way, not only that we conduct research, but in the topics that we conduct research into, and in the findings and the outputs that we have. You've got at the end of this slide my contact details. I'm happy to have a chat with anyone about research and processes at any point. And so all my contact details there for our course at UWS as well, if you want to drop a line. Or I've got my website, and I've got some links on there to open educational resources that may help you around practitioner research. And I'm on Twitter as well, if you want to find me on there. But that's the end of my slide deck for today. I'm just going to stop sharing that and hopefully come back into the main screen, and you can see me back in the light of day and say, has anyone got any questions that they want to fire in at me? I'm just going to have a look through the chat while we're all back together as well. So please do put up any questions or thoughts that you've got. Pauline, really pleased that you're able to use it. Really put point as well, research not being undertaken under, as part of a university, we need to be very mindful that, practitioner-led research is something we can all do. We don't have to be linked to a university to do that. We don't have to have professional affiliations to any higher education institutions. I've got a couple of CPD courses that I've started running at UWS, very light touch courses that I'm really keen to make sure that all practitioners are enabled to conduct research should they wish to. We've got a lovely body of research out there as well that is led by practitioners. If you have a look at the AGCAS, if you look at Phoenix, if you look at the Illuminate site, lots and lots on there of research that's been conducted by professionals in the workplace, the CDI's news and resources section, lots of reports on there that have been written by practitioners. Great, Joe. Be looking forward to hearing from you. I'm always up for a chat. You can see I'm really interested in this. So, never feel like you're wasting my time if you want to drop me a line and chat about ethics, because I could honestly talk about it to the ends of the earth. Brilliant. Good choice. Yeah, good point, Liz, about having ethics as a guardian. I think it's really important. It's the heart, absolutely the heart of what we do. I think ethics, ethical practice, moral sensitivity, all of these qualities that we have as career practitioners that can be really challenging to quantify. It's good to have a structure to go alongside. Okay, Juliet, I'm going to wrap up. We'll give you folk a little bit of breather before going into the next parallel sessions, because I know they've had 2 back-to-back ones there with lots of talking.
That's fantastic. You've given everybody time to go and take a quick cup of tea, have a comfort break, and at 3:05, come back into the main stage session where we will be talking about the poster and how to vote for the poster, and then the keynote. But thank you very much, Emma. Thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you, everyone, for coming along, and I'm glad you enjoyed the session.